I just loved Frank, and he would come into the clinic. This is back in the days when I just worked in general practice. He would come into the clinic every week, and he had this Jack Russell Terrier who was as fit as a fiddle. But Frank needed a reason to bring Jack, we'll call him Jack, into the clinic. And it was really to have a chat. So coming up to the vet clinic was just Frank's activity. So we'd weigh Jack, and the nurses on reception would always indulge a chat, talk about the football. I remember I always had to be up with the football score because he loved to talk about the football. As veterinarians in the community, we developed a relationship with Frank that was really special. And then he started confiding in me that he knew he was unwell, and he wasn't going to tell his doctor, and he wasn't going to tell his family because he was worried about what would happen to Jack. And I said, well, we need to fix that. So we need to find a way that we can look after Jack, and you trust us to do that. So there's huge relationship in here, so that you go and get yourself well. Golden Retriever Poodle cross. She was 15. She's been very sick on and off. She had Cushing's. She had arthritis, and she had a specific wish that it was a sunny day. So we literally looked at the weather forecast, and we chose the Tuesday because the weather was going to be lovely, and she wanted to help her dog pass in the garden. I have a saying that, every pet deserves a good death, and every person deserves choice in how they say goodbye.
Don't Be Caught Dead, the show bringing stories of death back to life. Here's your host, Catherine Ashton.
Today I'm speaking with Alicia Kennedy. She is an end-of-life veterinarian and the founder of Cherished Pets. Cherished Pets is an innovative social enterprise dedicated to keeping people and their pets together during life's most challenging circumstances. Recognising the profound bond between humans and animals, Alicia established Cherished Pets to support older people, individuals living with disability, those experiencing mental illness, homelessness, family violence, and other vulnerabilities. Under Alicia's leadership, Cherished Pets has pioneered a unique veterinary social work model that combines animal welfare, social work, and community support. Through volunteer pet care, emergency respite services, veterinary assistance, and social connection programs, Cherished Pets helps reduce loneliness, improve well-being, and ensure people are not forced to choose between their own safety and the companionship of their beloved pets. A passionate advocate for the animal-human bond, Alicia has led groundbreaking research partnerships exploring the role pets play in reducing isolation, supporting mental health, and strengthening communities. Her work continues to influence how communities, health services, and social support organisations recognise the vital companion animals play in people's lives. Thank you so much for being with us today, Alicia.
Thank you, Catherine. It's very good to be here.
So, when did you first recognise that there was a gap in the market for the services that Cherished Pets offers?
Oh, well, I've been a vet for 40 years this year, and it was in those early years in practice that I started to form deep connections with my elderly clients, and recognised that as life goes through its phases, particularly with aging, life changes, and a companion pet can become more important in someone's life, particularly if they're on their own and isolated. And at the same time, people start to lose their capacity to keep their pets healthy and well. So Cherished Pets was seeded over several decades of me loving my older clients and recognizing that they needed assistance in some areas to keep their pets healthy and well and together with them. And so I came into Cherished Pets with a question of, what do we need to do as a community to support the pets of our elderly neighbours so that they can continue to be together, because we all know the benefits that healthy companion pets can bring, particularly to older people. So it started with the oldies, of which I'm now one.
And tell me, what are the benefits that you found during when you were starting out your career?
Oh, I mean, I think it actually goes back to my childhood. I spent a lot of time with my nana, and she had this very fat and feisty fox terrier called Jenny that nobody loved except for my nana. She was this classic ankle biting dog, and this is back in the 60s, early 70s. And when my granddad died, my nana was really lonely, and I just saw the difference that little Jenny, the dog, made in her life. And when Jenny died, the dog died, yeah, my nana was just lost. And so I think that is actually one of my earliest, probably the origin story for my interest in my fascination with the human animal bond and the role of pets in healthy aging. And then fast forward several decades in my work as a veterinarian, I'm very community hearted. I just saw the difference that pets make through reduced loneliness. I mean, so many people will say my dog is the reason I leave the house every day, and then they go out for a walk, and then they're talking to people because dogs in particular break down. They're a catalyst for conversation. And then we know, I mean, the body of evidence behind the physical and mental health benefits of the human animal bond is just massive now. So cardiovascular health, shorter stays in hospital, much reduced loneliness, the mental health support that they bring through companionship. So, it's huge. And we witness that every day with our own pets and then in veterinary practice with our clients. So it research is catching up with what we've known for a long time, which is great. And they just make such a difference to people's lives. And then the point that I want to make there, though, too, is we need to help them stay healthy, the pets, because it can actually flip if an older person or a person experiencing vulnerability has an animal who's unwell and they don't have the resources to look after them, then it actually becomes a very stressful scenario that's very challenging for people's mental health and well-being. We see a huge amount of anxiety and anguish around how people are feeling about their companion animals.
And in what circumstances do you find that those feelings of anxiety are accentuated or exacerbated?
Oh, it's such a good question, because there's not one answer to that. I think we're seeing a lot more disconnection and isolation in our community, which is, probably with the rise of technology and certainly since COVID with people being isolated. And the attachment. So this is generalization, okay? So there's always a spectrum across this, but as a general rule, the human animal bond has intensified over the last few decades, where companion pets are now, the bond is stronger, and companion pets really are family members. And if I think back to the early days of my career, dogs were not sleeping in people's beds. They were outside in the kennel. Now it's actually normal, and most dogs are in the bedroom, if not in the bed, and cats too. So I tend to talk a lot about dogs, but this also applies for cats. I don't really have much to do with other pets, but you can certainly say that, definitely birds bring companionship to a lot of people, and a lot of the, exotics like rabbits and guinea pigs. So there is this shift with the role of pets in people's lives. We attached to that, we're also seeing a rise in anxiety generally in the community across all age groups. People are worrying more. And when it comes to being a pet owner, and our organisation is called Cherished Pets because it's from the heart. We really cherish our animals. We just love them so much. And so there's a lot of fear about what will I do if something happens to my pet. I think hope is in the HAB, the human animal bond. There is hope there because of the power of the human animal bond to connect people. And I think it's transformational for society. But in order for the human animal bond to reach its promise and its potential, we need to look after it, which means looking after the animals to keep them healthy and well, and then keeping them together with their human and looking after the human too. So that's where that multidisciplinary care team, so at Cherished Pets Foundation, which is our charity, we have the HAB care team. So you'll hear me talk about HAB, which is human animal bond. Everything's HAB. So the HAB care team is a multidisciplinary team. So you've got your community vet nurse, you've got your social worker, human support professional, and then we have our community of volunteers who need coordination. So we've got program support, volunteer management, and our program manager is an OT, an occupational therapist. So you've got this multidisciplinary lens around the things that come up around the human animal bond. And I like illustrating what I'm trying to say with stories, and I'm always remembering the most recent stories. So just in the past week, I have responded to what would have been one of the most challenging end of lives that I've had to, and I came out of that thinking, gosh, I'm really pleased that wasn't a younger vet, because I had to pull on all of my experience and wisdom. But the human was very isolated, no family around her, a small community through her dog activities, and her world was her two dogs. And through a whole sequence of tragic events, her 6-year-old dog had to be euthanized, and she was distraught, and to the point that she went into suicidal ideation. And it's knowing how to support people, because as a vet, that's not the skill set of a vet. And vets care so much. Veterinary teams care so much. I often think the receptionists who are on the front line of a vet practice, they carry a lot, they deal with a lot, they cop a lot. We all care so much about the animals and the pets and their people, and having that next layer of buffer of resources and support around the human animal bond is critically important, so that we can give people the support that they need. So the hope comes in the changing in the system. Okay. So you asked me about what I saw on the Churchill Fellowship. I saw so many wonderful things, and there's, exciting developments overseas in this veterinary social work space. And veterinary social work is an emerging field in the social work profession that it's about 20 years old, came out of the University of Tennessee. I got to go there and meet with the team. They have a college of veterinary social work, but it doesn't have to be restricted to the social worker, which I mentioned earlier. And so the hope for me is seeing this emerging field around, we're calling them human animal bond practitioners. So they're professional people who can support the human animal bond from the human side and the animal side. There's a lot of hope in that. And my ambition now, I'm on a little bit of I'm 61. I'm going to be 62 in December. But, it's like I really want to see the human animal bond embedded in the human health system, whether it's across aged care or disability, mental health, domestic violence and homelessness. They're the main groups that we support through our HAB care service. But I think that's where the hope lies, that when we can, what does that look like in practice? It means that your GPs and your human healthcare professionals are asking people, do you have a pet at home? Tell me about your pet. Have the name of that pet on their record. And what is the plan around the pet? And I know, Catherine, with the work that you're doing with critical info around, death planning and things like that. We need to be incorporating our animals into our end of life planning. And at Cherished Pets, every person on our home care assistance projects that we run through our charity, they have an emergency care plan, so that there is a plan there that if I have to go off to hospital and I've got no one else at home, what's going to happen to my pet? So, you know, um, we regularly deal with clients who need to be hospitalized, whether it's mental health or an older person that's had a fall and broken their hip, and having that plan in place to look after my pet, whether it's temporary or permanent, is essential to our own peace of mind. And, when I talk to people, when they reflect about the difference our service makes to them, it's like, it's given me peace of mind that if something happens to me, I know that my buddy is going to be loved and looked after. Yeah.
And it is so important because on the flip side of that, I've heard stories previously where people have left emergency and receiving care and the treatment that they need because they don't have a care plan in place for their pet.
And discharged themselves.
Yeah.
Like that that happens. And some of my, I've got so many stories, but some of my early experiences with clients that made me realize I needed to do something about this problem, which is who's going to look after my pet if something happens to me. I remember this older client, Frank. I just loved Frank, and he would come into the clinic. This is back in the days when I just worked in general practice. He would come into the clinic every week, and he had this Jack Russell Terrier who was as fit as a fiddle. But Frank needed a reason to bring Jack, we'll call him Jack, into the clinic. And it was really to have a chat. So coming up to the vet clinic was just Frank's activity. So we'd weigh Jack, and the nurses on reception would always indulge a chat, talk about the football. I remember I always had to be up with the football score because he loved to talk about the football. And then so we developed, as veterinarians in the community, we developed a relationship with Frank that was really special. And then he started confiding in me that he knew he was unwell, and he wasn't going to tell his doctor, and he wasn't going to tell his family because he was worried about what would happen to Jack. And I said, well, we need to fix that. So we need to find a way that we can look after Jack, and you trust us to do that. So there's huge relationship in here, so that you go and get yourself well, and then we get you back together again. And, that was a story that seeded this idea of creating a community service that did the emergency care plans and the respite care. Yeah.
Another thing that strikes me about something that you said earlier in relation to how our bonds with our pets have increased over time. We recently had hard rubbish here, and I saw one or two kennels on the side of the road, and I thought my dog wouldn't know what a kennel looked like. Because exactly what you said, my pet, my dog and my cat are both, inside, sleep on the bed. Well, let's be honest, they sleep wherever they damn well want. Um, but it is a common thing. So they are part of your family. So if there is no other family around and no other support network, it does rely heavily on the relationship you build, isn't it? And that
So much
trust.
so. Oh, so much so. And so years ago, someone said to me, my dog, uh, how did he put it? He doesn't live in my house. I live in his kennel. I've never forgotten that. He was this big Rottweiler, and he just had the run of the place. Like, he was actually a very naughty dog. He lived with this man who was on his own, and I can't even remember the name of the dog now. It was years ago, but it's like, he doesn't live in my house. I live in his kennel. Um, I I know this, and I'm passionate about it, and it comes through in my energy that the human animal bond and companion pets are just so powerful to connect community. And it was always my hope with Cherished Pets to build community around the human animal bond, and it does it on its own. So particularly through our foundation, Cherished Pets Foundation, through our home care assistance program. So the home care assistance program is exactly what it sounds like. It's providing assistance for pets in the home. And we have incredible volunteers, and we match them with elderly residents and people living with a disability. And the majority of our volunteers do dog walking, okay? But it's so much more than just turning up and walking a dog. Usually there's a cup of tea in there and a chat. And, we even had one client where her dog didn't want to walk, but the volunteer would still go and have a chat and a cup of tea. So these friendships develop. In there, we also have our community vet nurse who does the home visits to make sure that the well-being and the health of the pet is being maintained, depending on what the needs are. The volunteers also transport pets to the vet or to the groomer or to, well, mainly for those things, to the vet and the groomer. But the other key thing there is if the elderly person needs to go into hospital or whatever, there are volunteers that look after the pets too. What we have seen, so Cherished Pets Foundation's 11 years old this year, is we have got friendships that started 10 years ago, and the dog has long gone, right? But the friendships are sustaining, and it's building community around animals, and there's so much hope in that too. Like, I get very excited about the power of this type of community-hearted service to connect people. And it's not just the elderly people that are receiving the service. This gives meaning and purpose for a lot of our volunteers. We have one volunteer who I remember saying if it wasn't for Cherished Pets, she probably wouldn't leave her house. And she walks that dog 4 times a week, and she comes to if we have a little morning tea or something. So there's something about pets where we don't feel judged by them. They're an anchor. They're a commonality. In fact, I talk about this a lot. I talk a lot. Being an end-of-life veterinarian, we go into people's homes, and I go in. So we're on the Bellarine Peninsula, just outside Ocean Grove, and we're in the Geelong region. So we cover Ocean Grove, the Bellarine, and the Geelong region. I go into homes across the community. So I often describe them as the cleanest, whitest homes up on the hill with the beautiful view, and 20 minutes north, you're in a hoarder's house and a completely different home environment. And there's very few things that are constant in our society. The human animal bond is one of them. And I can tell you now that the love between a human and an animal is the same in that white house on the hill to the hoarder's house in the northern suburbs. And there's an opportunity in that. And this ties back to my Churchill Fellowship. And now this year I'm doing a Kenneth Meyer Innovation Fellowship with a very clear goal to look at how we can expand the human animal bond support services outside of our region because of the magic that we've created here. And I think when it comes to funding and the way society operates, we live in silos. We've got aged care here, and disability, and mental health, and homelessness, and domestic violence, and all the others. And I'm like, well, actually, hang on. The human animal bond is across everything. And when we do grant applications and you have to tick a box, and you're only allowed to tick one box, what box do you think I tick when we've got, is this funding for aged care, housing, family domestic violence, disability, mental health? Which box do you think I tick?
Out of that selection, I would say mental health because it's probably the broadest.
See, 10 out of 10. It is the umbrella. It's actually mental health is across all of it. And I have a particular interest in older women, vulnerability in older women, because one of our sort of very common profile client is uh, over 55, often single, has had a history perhaps of domestic family violence, living on the smell of an oily rag because they don't have much super because they raised the family or whatever, often estranged from their family, often with some sort of chronic condition, and then mental health, anxiety. And so that's not one box. And so until our society can shift around the role of the human animal bond and support. So my vision is very clear and it hasn't changed in 10 years. So my vision is a world where the human animal bond is recognized, valued, and supported for the vital role it plays in healthy individuals, connected communities, and a thriving society. Yeah.
I love that.
Yes, I love it too. That's why I get out of bed every morning. Because it is like I think I'm a little bit of I can't talk about much else, but I just think in so many ways the human animal bond is the answer to all the problems. And of course it's not, but that's my bubble. But I think if we invest in the human animal bond, we can actually really see some great society changes, which includes supporting our veterinary teams, because you need vets. I'll say to people, can you imagine a society without companion animals? And they go, oh, God, no. I'm like, can you imagine a society without vets? Oh, absolutely not, because we love our vets, because we need our vets to keep our pets healthy. I'm not even talking about horses and farm animals, because that's not my world, but there's a whole conversation there too. And there's been a lot of conversation and discussion and research on this on the public good of vets, because when it comes to government support and society support, animal welfare and vets are over here, and then all the human health stuff is over here. And I'm trying to bridge that dog because it just wasn't time. But because he was the owner, you know, the owner gives consent, there was that sense that I had to. Never again. And actually, you don't have to. You can say no. It's not aligning to my values, and I don't believe it's the right thing to do. But I do know then that they'll just go and find somebody that will do it. And life was different then. And to be honest, a Labrador back then, 12 to 13 was old. But I really suffered from performing that euthanasia. So when I started euthanasia, end of life as a dedicated service, my guiding principles, I've got three things. One is that the condition is terminal. Okay, we know that this animal is dying. Now, aging is terminal too. So there's that geriatric care of our older dogs where it's mobility and cognitive decline and quality of life decline. So they're dying for some reason. But of course, we see a lot of younger dogs with cancer and other conditions too. The second one is that the suffering's becoming irreversible. So we're running out of options to maintain quality of life. So I don't believe in quantity of life for the sake of it. So my 21-year-old cat, her quality of life is still really good and she's thriving. But as soon as she starts becoming miserable or whatever, then when the suffering becomes, we can't manage it anymore, whether it's pain or comfort from whatever the condition is. The third one I think is really important, and it's about the human animal bond. It's actually, what is this human's capacity to cope with what's happening with their pet and to provide for their pet's changing needs? Because I have seen animals suffer because people can't provide for the changing needs, or even worse, people who won't let go. Okay, that's too common, where people have got such an attachment to their pet that they're allowing that pet to suffer because they don't want to lose their pet. And I don't approach those conversations with judgment. I approach those conversations with an understanding of how important this bond is and how scared people are to lose their pet. So it's around preparing people and having a plan and being brave to have the conversations about preparing for the end of my cherished pet's life. But those three guiding principles really anchor me to it in that decision-making process. And then the question around planning for a good death, well, I will talk to people about that. And, most of the time, death doesn't come suddenly. Most of the time, there's a period of time that we know it's on the horizon, and that might be tomorrow or that might be in 2 years' time. But we start the conversation, and I'm thinking of one in particular where it was an older Groodle, golden retriever poodle cross. She was 15. She's been very sick on and off. She had Cushing's. She had arthritis and mobility issues. Her quality of life was declining. We made the decision that sooner is better than later. That's a really important point to make. People regret waiting too long. But there's a saying in the end of life vet world, better a month too early than a month too late. And so I said to this client, how do you want her last day to be? Well, they wanted to go to the beach and have an ice cream, and all those treats at the end of life are great, but you also don't want to give them vomiting and diarrhea. So you kind of pace it. But she had a specific wish that it was a sunny day. So we literally looked at the weather forecast and we chose the Tuesday because the weather was going to be lovely. And she wanted to help her dog pass in the garden. So one of the things with home euthanasias and planned end of lives, which aren't always possible in emergency scenarios, and I get that, but most of the time there's some planning, that there's choice. I have a saying that, every pet deserves a good death and every person deserves choice in how they say goodbye. So a lot of the requests obviously are at home, but we've certainly done them at the beach and in all sorts of places, in the garden or in the house, on the bed. I've all sorts of places. Definitely letting the pet have some choice about where they want to be. And then the process is peaceful, pain-free, in the comfort of their favourite place and surrounded by the people that they love. Yeah. So that's how a good death can be, when there's some planning and discussion around it. Yeah.
And is this service available throughout Australia? Like, how do you find someone who can support you with this sort of choices?
Yeah, look, it's actually beautiful that there has been a real increase in the number of compassionate home euthanasia services available all over the world. But in Australia, there's most areas now you would Google compassionate home pet euthanasia, or most vets now will be able to recommend someone. So there's quite a few. There's some big companies now that are national in their outreach. So Rest Your Paws and The Kindest Goodbye. So Sunset Vets in also is another one who I really advocate for, because they're actually independently owned. So there are lots of options for home euthanasias, and I feel sad sometimes when people say, oh, I didn't know that was an option. Yeah, they're very special. It's a sacred time.
And then moving on to memorialisation and cremation, like how do you and what are the options nowadays for people when it comes to body disposal and memorialisation for their animal friends?
Yeah, look, it's a big industry now. Yeah. So there are lots of options. So cremation is pretty much routine. Um, people do still bury their pets, but less often. And certainly it's way easier to bury a cat at home than it is a dog, depending on the size. And technically, I think you're not meant to, particularly if they've been euthanized. So there's concerns around impact on the environment with burials. So most people choose cremation, and there's usually the option of communal cremation, which is the more affordable option where pets are cremated together and you don't get the ashes back. I would say at least 50 to 60% of people now choose private cremation, individual cremation, where they get their pets' ashes back. And there is a huge range of options, from paw prints to fur clippings to jewelry, and then obviously the receptacles for the ashes. So that whole memorabilia, in a way, I feel it's a little bit over the top. There's too much choice for people. Most people go with the simplest, which is the scatter tin or a wooden box or a lovely urn. And it's a really important part of healthy bereavement. So you think about the day that the pet dies, most of the time euthanasia, but also there's natural death. The pet is then collected and taken for cremation, and it's usually about a 7 to 10 day period when the ashes come back. And I often liken that to the death and the funeral in people. So bringing the ashes home is really profound, and it all comes back out. And that is the time to do the honouring and the ritual and the little funeral at home, particularly for families. I think when I spend a lot of time with parents with children asking me what do we do about the kids, and the death of a pet is such a life opportunity for a family. For a lot of children, it's their first experience with death, and so it is a learning opportunity. And the way the parents talk about it and navigate it can be really powerful. So that we see beautiful things where children will write a message or draw a picture that goes with their pet for cremation, but then that bringing the pet home is the opportunity to have the music and the candle burning and the flowers, and have a little bit of a ritual around it.
Because there is such a emptiness at times when you return home and the pet's no longer in the house.
Yes, it can be really hard. And then there's always the individual response to my pet's belongings. So beds and toys and food bowls. Everyone's different in that regard. Some people just want to get it all out of the house the day the pet dies. Other people like to have their pet's belongings around them. And then, of course, there's always the conversation around the other animals in the household, the companion pets, and how to involve them. And, I'm a great believer in giving companion pets the opportunity to be present, maybe not through the actual euthanasia, but to have the opportunity to come and sniff their friend goodbye. And you see a whole variety of responses, but I think they definitely know and they definitely grieve. And so sometimes keeping their companion pet's bed there becomes an opportunity for them to still have the scent of their lost pet around them for the companion animal. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I've witnessed some really amazing things. I remember this little whippet who really, really was at the end of her life and really needed to go, and they had a Siamese cat. And after this little dog died, she was really tiny, this dog. She was only about 6 kilos. She was curled up on her bed, on the master bed, but she was in her bed. And the cat came in and It just came in and it sniffed and it pawed, and then it just curled itself up next to its little. Yeah, it was really like, oh. And then you just, it's so important to allow time and space for those moments. Really important. Not to rush things.
And bereavement support, because as we're both sort of tearing up a little bit here with that story, it really impacts you.
It does. And I think on the hope side, there is a lot more recognition of pet loss as true bereavement. You've lost a family member. It doesn't matter whether that's a human or non-human family member. A lot more workplaces are receptive to bereavement leave and things like that. So people do need to honour their bereavement journey. And as you would know, grief is different for everyone. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And that process starts in that anticipatory grief phase. So I think in the hopeful world where pets have a beautiful, good death, that often leans into a healthier bereavement time. And it's knowing how to access support if you need it. So at Cherished Pets, we have our care team with the foundation, and if somebody's got concerns, then they can have a chat to our social workers. So that's a big part of veterinary social work, is supporting people through grief and loss. And there does come a time with a small number of people where they need additional support. So then it's referral. There's a couple, I mean, I have a couple of pet bereavement counsellors who I will refer people to, who are very good at that. Or if there's not one available, there's certainly remote services. A website called People and Their Pets has a list of bereavement counsellors. Sunset Vets has a support program. But if none of those are lining up, talking to your GP and getting a referral, my experience now compared with a couple of decades ago is that a lot of psychologists and counsellors are a lot more tuned in to pet bereavement. And, the worst thing you can say was he was just a dog. Like, anyone listening to this, you just don't say he was just a dog. It's just not okay. Yeah.
And what are some of the other things that, in your experience, are probably best that we don't do when it comes to someone who has just lost a pet?
Well, the language is what you say to people. So I think it's what you do is knowledge that grief is different for everyone and it's very individual. What you don't do is say, well, he was just a dog, get over it. I think, yeah, you don't dismiss it as being something really profound in people's lives. And you get a full spectrum of people. Some people are fine. Most people are fine. They have very individual ways of grieving and processing it. I think it's more when you see a lot more people, particularly those who are isolated, who really do struggle, and disenfranchised grief is a very real issue with pets too. So what you don't do is dismiss it and pretend that it's not happening.
And do you think that as we see an increase in companion animals, that our need to be aware of that and be sensitive to that will also increase over time as well?
I think so. I mean, like I said earlier, pet bereavement leave is a lot more accepted now, giving people the space. I mean, I think workplaces really do play a role here. I remember a client, this is probably 10 years ago. And so this is before COVID, before we were Zooming and used to working from home. Her dog was diagnosed with a terminal illness, but it was going to be like 6 months. and he had extra needs and he actually had megaesophagus, so he needed to be fed regularly small amounts of food, and he just couldn't be left for long periods. Her company was so ahead of its time because they actually, this is before COVID, set her up with an office at home so that she could work from home and be there with her dog until he died, and be able to support him, and like that's just incredible. So more of that. And I think as the human animal bond becomes more recognized for its value and its role in healthy, thriving communities and society, then that pet bereavement piece is just going to be like human loss. Mm.
And so, with the new fellowship that you have coming up, what do you hope to learn to expand your model?
So I feel very blessed. So the Kenneth Meyer Innovation Fellowship's offered to 3 Australians every year to advance an innovation that can improve Australian society. I'm very excited that this year 2 of the recipients are vets, which I think, going back to my earlier conversation with you about the role of vets in healthy, thriving societies, I think it's great to see that vets are present. And the third one, she's a special needs dentist, so supporting people with a disability with their dentistry. So my fellowship is very much around embedding the human animal bond into the public health system. And there's different ways of doing that, but having an accessible human animal bond support service that sits at that bridge between animal welfare and veterinary services and all the human healthcare and community support services. So it's pretty much looking at what we've been doing here in the Geelong region, how that might be scaled or piloted in another region. So there's some activity there. It's around how we train and support veterinary teams to better understand the social issues that impact us in practice. So there's been some really good research around the impact of social determinants of health on animal welfare that really justifies the fact that having social services around the human animal bond has a bottom line benefit back to the community and a bottom line economic benefit, because when we're supporting the health of people and supporting older people to stay independent in the community, that actually has because at the end of the day, the government's just, they're mainly interested in the economic benefit. And there's a social return on investment. I think working within the veterinary profession around this issue of accessible, affordable care and how we can, I talk about a funding bucket to provide vet bill assistance for eligible people. You have to be very careful that there's an eligibility process and that you just don't open up floodgates, because it's a struggle for a lot of people. So there's a lot of work to do. And my very specific goal, and I don't know who's listening to your podcast, but I have a very clear goal that home pet care services will be on the drop-down menu on the My Aged Care website, so that in the aged care system, care of pets in the home as well as in residential settings is recognised as how we support older people for healthy aging. Yeah.
I love that.
Yes. So connect me to all the right people. I mean, that advocacy piece is a big part of what I'll be doing over the next 12 months, trying to
But
influence.
you clearly are seeing and hearing those examples every day of the woman that you mentioned that is the volunteer, that the only reason why she gets out of bed is she goes to walk this dog, and she does that 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And you think of the health benefit and the
Yeah.
impact of that to her own health and well-being, but those that ripple effect, it's a really beautiful vision to have.
And the science is backing it. So
Yeah.
I've literally just submitted my 20,000 word report for my Churchill Fellowship. So, if anyone's intrigued with this conversation and wants to follow up and be a part of the movement, my social media handles are Social Hearted Vet, and the report will be published in September, late August, September. And I also have a Substack where I'll be doing more writing about, pulling it apart. But yeah, it is a movement. There's a lot of activity in Australia, a lot of services popping up in the human animal bond social support space, and they're needed, particularly around, domestic violence and homelessness. We haven't really talked about that. It's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, join the movement and support the charities that are working in this space. I talk about my funding bucket, and I'm trying to we need a lot of money in now in the funding bucket to support the human animal bond. So a lot of what I do is talk to people about tapping into funding sources, including the government, philanthropy, industry, private donors, bequests, all of it. I think it's not one person's problem. We all play a role. 70% of Australians love and cherish their pets. Many Australians struggle to look after their pets. So when people struggle, animals suffer. So if you love animals and you love people, then the human animal bond is something that we should be preserving and protecting and enabling to reach its promise. And to do that, we need funding. And that funding responsibility does not sit with one party. It's all of them: government, industry, philanthropy, donors, bequests, those ones that I mentioned before.
And I think what's become very clear through talking to you as well, Alicia, is that it also lies with each of us to make sure that we have a care plan for our pets.
I talk about this all the time. It doesn't matter how old you are, where you live, how many people in your household, including pets in your personal planning, your healthcare plan. Every time I speak to doctors, I'm like, are you asking your patients if they have a pet? Because if you're not serving the best interests of your patient. But also, while we're in this crisis around vet bill affordability, people actually need to have a plan about what they can spend. So I advocate for insurance because it provides some relief, but a lot of people, even insurance isn't affordable. I've got 3 dogs, 2 of them are insured, and I'm very relieved to have them insured. So if that's an option, that's a good option. But you also need to have a plan for a crisis. It does not take long. This is going to really surprise you. I've had 2 clients in the last month who have lost a dog after spending over $30,000 on them, through all the best care, and it's exceptional, and the care that we can offer them is exceptional, and the specialist teams can do so much. And if people have got the resources to fund $30,000 of care, that's great. What I see is people in that moment of crisis hanging on to hope, spending money that they don't have. That's the issue. And some of the financial options available can be quite predatory for people who are financially insecure. So that's another social issue that we need to be aware of. So I say to people, you really actually need to think, this is hard, but it's actually, we have to say, what would you cap the care of your dog? Is it 5,000 or 10,000 or 30,000? So that when you step into that crisis, because they come out of the blue, we don't know they're going to happen, we've got the plan to keep us anchored in making those decisions. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, because when you're in that moment, emotions take over, and you can't think clearly.
Clearly.
So it's a good thing to have those conversations before emotions are actually part of it.
And I do a lot of what a lot of the work that I do now with my vet hat on in that human animal bond role is as an independent, like I'm not a clever vet anymore. I'm an older vet, and the younger vets are way cleverer than me, but I am wise and I'm very connected. And one of my strengths is helping people guide them in their decision making. So sometimes people step away from that bubble of intensity and you can do this and you can do that. And then they'll just have a conversation with me so that I can help them make that human animal bond centered decision. Because I don't want to see people spiral into debt that then has a ripple effect to give a dog an extra 3 months.
Everything's connected, isn't it?
All connected. Yeah. Yeah.
Alicia, I can't thank you enough for your time today into the wonderful world of how you've created Cherished Pets and the people that you support in the community. I really look forward to hearing how we can make sure that we take what you've done on the Bellarine Peninsula and multiply that around the country.
Yes, wouldn't that be lovely? And we'll get home pet care services on the drop down menu of my aged care.
I'll be keeping an eye out, don't you worry.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. It's been lovely. Have I got time for another story? So, my Churchill Fellowship was over 40 meetings across 4 countries I was away for 3 months because I took some personal leave, right? And I'd done my fellowship and I'd had a conversation with someone, and it's like hope is in the hab. And that really, I had a lot to do with Jane Goodall, and hope is a word that brings hope. It's got that vibe. So hope is in the hab. And that was kind of my thread. This is a true story. After I'd finished my fellowship, I spent some time with my daughter in Edinburgh and we went for a walk. And I always stop and talk to people with dogs, especially if it's a Labrador. And we met this black Labrador and I patted him, and it was an older man. And we just started chatting to him. And I said, "What's her name?" And he said, "It was Hope." This black Labrador was called Hope. And then he said to me, "I got her a few years ago when my wife was diagnosed with dementia, and she was my wife's support dog, and his wife had died 2 years ago. And he said, if it wasn't for Hope, I wouldn't get out of bed every day." And I'm like, well, somebody sent me that story because it just wrapped up my 3 months of exploration so beautifully. And yeah, that story will be shared. Yeah,
That is such a beautiful story. I hope it made it into the report.
it did. It was in the conclusion.
Oh, that's great. I
Yes,
love that.
yes. And luckily I took a photo of her. I got his permission. So her photo will be in the report. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And we'll make sure
Mm,
we include all of the links so people can connect on everything that you're doing and following and read more if they'd like to and support where they can.
amazing. Thank you. It's been lovely.